Powered by Rev Media in partnership with TSN, it is Season 5. This is Episode 3 of the Ray Dregs Hockey Podcast, and it is presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. Ray Ferraro, we have former teammate, old teammate of yours, Steve Staios, who's now the newly minted president of hockey operations for the Ottawa Senators. He's going to join us in a bit from Truro, Nova Scotia, where the Sens are working their way through that great province in the preseason. And, you know, you would know this. And often when we have former players on here, especially teammates of yours, we'll talk after the fact about how, could you see it coming? You know, so if you rewind the clock and take us back to your days in Atlanta with Steve Staios, you know, could you envision at that time just how he approached the game, his thinking, all of that one day he'd be the president of hockey operations for an NHL team?
I would say no to the president stuff, like to the upper management. If you would have said, do you think he would be a coach? I would have said 100%.
Okay.
Like even as a younger player, he had that demeanor. He had that, like that interest in how things were being run. And not everybody does. Like, you know, a lot of players go to the rink and do their thing and they're focused in and then they go home, but you just don't see them as a coach. And so I thought that's what Steve, I could easily see Steve getting into that sort of, that pathway. The management stuff, I think became a little more clear as, you know, I started to broadcast and I was in Edmonton when he was there. And you could just see that he had a command without really trying to have one. You know, he's a very, he's just a very upfront sort of person. And I was not surprised when he went into the management side in Hamilton and junior. That just seemed to be the right thing.
You know, I'm happy for Ottawa, mostly the city and the fan base, because now all of the ownership nonsense over the years is behind them, right?
Right.
Pierre Dorian, management group, the coaching staff have done a real nice job in getting that team to where they're at right now. And there's nothing but promise ahead. Now, they've got to prove it on the ice. But then you take it up a notch and you look at the layering, right? And it does matter to have an owner of the substance of Michael Andlauer and, you know, the other minority investors that he has along with him. And likewise, hiring of Steve Staios as president of hockey operations, right? Because if you don't have stability at the top, then the whole foundation of your organization can erode pretty quickly.
Well, for sure it can and does. And one of the things that Ottawa has been working with the last little while is a pretty skeleton staff.
Yeah.
And so you have lots of people doing lots of things. And the fact that they're going to be able to support and backfill their, you know, the positions in their organization will make them a better group just by by default. Now, don't forget, like, you know, Steve's the president, and with the presidency goes the business side. A lot of it is the business side as well as supporting the hockey side.
Right.
And, you know, in short order, once the season starts, you know, the focus goes to the ice, but the focus is also on what's happening with the building. What does the future of the Senators have off the ice? And a lot of that will be stuff that Steve works on, and it's going to be a busy time for him.
We'll check in with Steve Staios, the president of hockey operations for the Ottawa Senators, in just a moment. Time for our Tim Hortons headlines. Hey, Canada, Tim's NHL trading cards are back with an all-new set, so get ready to unpack these beauties. Score your favorite hockey stars. You can grab them before they're gone. They are available now only at Tim's. Connor Bedard, Ray, seems like a constant theme, right? You know, and until we allow this young man to settle in as an NHL player, and how long that takes, you know, that'll be up to Bedard and developmentally where he's at. But we do have to pay close attention to what he's doing now, because this is our sample size. So Bedard has 5 points in 3 preseason games. We know he can shoot the puck. We've seen that. But he's drawing attention now in the early goings for his hockey IQ and for his playmaking ability. I mean, so what does that suggest to you? Yes, of course, there's a ton of work before we can anoint this kid as an NHL star or superstar, but man, the toolbox looks pretty full based on what we're seeing at this stage of his NHL career.
Sure. Like I've known of Bedard since he was 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
And he was always just, I would say two things were always talked about with him was that you could never get him away from the game. And, like his love and passion to, when you're a kid, it's not work, but I'll say work on the things that have helped him become what he is already. But he just loved to do it all the time. And the second thing was just this ability that he had. But if you don't have a way to implement those tools and gifts that you have, then a lot of it slides out the backside. And man, I think the IQ, what you can see is, I have this phrase I like to use, that he sees the next play before it happens.
Yeah.
And so as the puck's coming to him, he can see where the next play is. And really great players have that ability. A lot of players need the puck to come to them, and then they look up, and then they find the next play, and sometimes you can make it and sometimes you can't because everything goes so fast. And Connor seems to be able to have that ability. He certainly has had it all the way through his junior career. Now, look, he can only play the game that's in front of him. The next stage is going to be, you're playing against full-time NHL players, and that's in the regular season. And then after Thanksgiving, it's going to, U.S. Thanksgiving, it's going to jump another gear. And then you get into the dead portion of the season where everybody's just kind of slogging along. And then it's the playoff rush. And all those steps are all going to be part of Connor's learning experience. But the fact that he can see the game is going to help him when his legs aren't quite there that night, or the Blackhawks are getting run over on a particular night. That stuff helps you drive through what are the tougher times.
A contract signing this week, Ray, in Anaheim. Trevor Zegras signs a 3-year contract. Well, we'll ask Steve Staios of the Ottawa Senators about Shane Pinto coming up in a few minutes. But Zegras missed 2 weeks in that contract stalemate. Now he's talking about, after he gets the deal, he's talking about how important it is for him to work on his two-way game. He wants to be a better two-way forward. And I don't know Greg Cronin very well, the new coach of the Anaheim Ducks, but that's part of his MO, right? There aren't too many NHL head coaches that don't want everybody to be solid defensively. Are you skeptical with Trevor Zegras, or do you think that this kid, he means what he says? He's going to put in the work and he's going to try and become an all-around better player?
No, I'm not skeptical at all. And one of the reasons I'm not is that I wouldn't say Jack Hughes is going to win the Selke Trophy anytime soon.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of parallels between the creativity of Jack Hughes and the creativity of Trevor Zegras. And when you have that ability, really all that they're asking from you is to be adequate. They're not asking you to check somebody into the ground.
Right.
They got other guys that can do that. And if they don't, they should go find them.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to have the puck on your stick. Well, one of the things you learn as you get a little bit older is the better you are without it, the more time you have with it. And that's one thing that I think is a fair criticism of Zegras. The other part is, do you want to be a centerman or do you want to be a winger? Because if you want to be a centerman, in a lot of cases, you're going to have to do, a little bit more work without the puck. I know there's criticism of Zegras. Some people don't like the way that he plays the game because there's such a flair to him. I don't care. I think the kid is an incredibly talented player. And yes, it's Greg Cronin's job in Anaheim to help him become a more well-rounded player. And Trevor's got to accept that. If he wants to be thought of among the best players in the league, he's going to have to be better in that regard. And the other thing I think we maybe overlook with these guys is he 22?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a maturity thing there, right? I mean, but that's fine.
And it comes. Yeah, Dregs, and it does happen. It does happen. And I think in a lot of cases, we look at players at that age and think they're a finished product. And they're, certainly when you're at their level, there's always a little bit more because they can do more than the average player.
Right. I had an exchange recently with Rob Blake, the general manager of the Los Angeles Kings. And you know what? You go through it, you do your preseason prep, and then game by game, you're prepping and all that. I feel like from an Eastern perspective, a team like the Los Angeles Kings will somewhat get overlooked. And I'm looking at this club, and I'm looking at them. And the reason I started, aside from the obvious of just doing the preseason prep, is I'm trying to formulate ideas. Okay, where might be the best fit for Patrick Kane when he's healthy enough, be it in November, December, whenever that happens to be. So I have this exchange with Blakey, and it's more about, are you loaded up front? Like, are you set up front was the word that I use, set. Cap space is always going to be an issue, certainly for LA, for a lot of teams that may have interest. He said they're set up front. The cap space is an issue, but then I got looking at that team. Are they getting enough credit at this point? Or is it just, it's the preseason and we're not digging in on anything? Could LA be maybe better than what some would expect at this stage?
Well, I think that's a really good team. When I talk about the Western Conference and in particular the top end of it, you got Vegas and Edmonton, and I put LA there too. They're a really, really good team. Now, can Cam Talbot stay healthy in goal? I don't know. Is Phoenix Copley going to be able to replicate the year that he had last year? I mean, every team has a question somewhere.
Right.
And I don't think it's not a stretch to say in LA it's in goal. Mm-hmm. And part of it is that, Talbot's 35 years old and has had a little bit of a history of injury over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
They need to keep him healthy. But that team doesn't give up a lot of chances. It's been in their DNA for well over a decade. That they defensively they make it real hard for you. You're going up against them, and there's not many teams going to match up against Dubois, Kopitar, and Danault up the middle of the ice. Mm-hmm. Like that's about as strong as you're going to get, and as hard as it's going to be to play through those guys as anyone else. I mean, that's right. Certainly the Edmonton, Draisaitl and McDavid are they're at another level, but to play through all three of those guys, if you're a centerman, is going to be a chore. I think LA is very, very good.
Yeah. Well, you know what? As we look ahead to Friday, episode 4 of the Ray Dregs podcast, maybe that's what we'll do. We're drifting into next week, right? We'll take a look at each conference and, maybe the safe bets, the teams that we know are going to be good. Get your thoughts on maybe a surprise, like a team that you feel is ready to kick it up another notch on both sides. I mean, one of them is obviously Ottawa, but we'll do a deeper dive in episodes coming up here before the start of the regular season. Tuesday night, as we record here Wednesday morning, Ray, watch the Capitals and the Boston Bruins, 5-4 overtime win for the Washington Capitals. And as I'm watching this, I'm kind of intrigued by the Caps because I don't have a true read on this team.
Right.
I don't. I'm like, I'm seeing the sum of the parts, maybe, like the pieces look, given the experience of Ovechkin and Kuznetsov and Backstrom and go down the list, that they're going to be competitive. I just don't know. I don't have a good read, comparatively speaking, on where they're going to be. Are you kind of in that camp as well? Or are you leaning towards Washington taking a step back, or the opposite, being that competitive, potentially contending group?
Well, I think they are kind of reloading a little bit here. They're clearly going to try and take a last run or two here, while as they should with Ovechkin and the veteran players you mentioned, along with TJ Oshie and
yeah.
But when your team is built around the older players as they are, there are some major question marks that always pop up. One of them, of course, is health.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, outside of Ovechkin, everybody gets hurt as they get older. I mean, he's a truck. He just doesn't seem to get hurt very often. He's 70 plus goals away from the goal record. It's an odd thing that there's going to be so much focus on whether Ovechkin can get to that record. It's almost like the Caps are secondary in that pursuit. The other danger is you look at them, you read those names, and you think of them 4 years ago. And, time wins every time. Mm-hmm. Every time. And, Nick Backstrom came back after that hip resurfacing surgery he had, which was the surgery that Patrick Kane had. And Backstrom was never a quick, elusive skater anyway.
Right.
But, I mean, it's a really hard go. What can Nick Backstrom give them? Kuznetsov had a real down year for them. Is he able to bounce back? And, last year they missed John Carlson for most of the year with that horrific injury he had. And so all these things add up to, I don't really know. They don't seem like a team that you would fear.
Yeah.
Except, is that too dismissive of a team that I still think I think they're going to be right around the cut line.
Okay.
But man, that's going to get crowded in a hurry. I said it the other day, those young teams, Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit, they're going to tip the apple cart over either this year or next year. It's coming. And when they do, there's going to be some longtime regular teams that are going to be out.
All right, those are your headlines presented by Tim Hortons.
Tim's NHL trading cards are back. Unpack the thrill. Score your favorite icons with an all-new set. Get yours before they're gone. Only at Tim's.
Our interviews on Ray and Dregs this year brought to you by Canadian Club Whiskey. Introducing the first release of the Canadian Club Invitation Series. So it's CC 15-year-old Sherry Cask. Delicious. Signature CC Classic 12-year-old whiskey finished with a secondary aging in the Oloroso Sherry Cask. So all the hallmarks of classic Canadian Club with the added richness and sweetness of sherry. All right, we're pleased to be joined on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast by Steve Staios, who's now the president of hockey operations. Ray, as you know, with the Ottawa Senators. You're joining us from Truro, Nova Scotia, where the Ottawa Senators are entertaining fans there locally through this preseason. But does it kind of feel like you're drinking out of the end of a fire hose, Steve? Everything that's been thrown at you since taking over the position of president of hockey ops?
A good way to describe it, Dregs, for sure, but enjoying every minute of it. But, I think it's day 5 or 6 on the job for me. So certainly a lot to get to here early, but most importantly is just to build the relationships with the staff and the players and being around the group. I think we've talked a lot. Michael Andlauer's talked a lot about culture and communication and caring, and so really at this point in time, and then it's been terrific. We've had a couple of days here, off days in between preseason games, and really getting to know the staff.
Is that really the first step of it, Steve? Is just try to get a handle on who's who and who does what, and whatever your path forward might be out of that? Yeah,
exactly, Ray. I think for me to get to know the people in their positions and what they do, and it'll give me a better idea of how things have been running and where we may need some more immediate support in some areas, and just a longer term vision as well. But I think until I can get in on the day to day and get the engine running here, that'll be the first step.
Well, I think most people probably have an understanding of how important ownership is to an organization. But you said something there about bringing in support, and the fact that Michael Andlauer's group has funding and pockets enough to bring support has to maybe change the way the Senators can look at what they can do as opposed to what they've been able to do off the ice.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that's the case because, and not just on, funding and and bringing more people in. Sometimes more isn't better. It's just looking at each area to guide it with the lines of communication, really maximize each area of it. I'll give you an example where we're off to a good start is we've hired Sean Tierney, who I worked with on the analytics side, and I hired Sean back in Hamilton. I guess about 6 years ago now, and we used him exclusively with the Bulldogs until he moved on to Sport Logic. Now he's in a position that we didn't have before, really, and so how he can build up on that department, I think, is very exciting. I think that's another differentiator for us and moving us in the right direction. But that's just an example, and I'm going to look to see how we can do that. Not necessarily bringing people in, like I said, but how we can do that in each area of the organization.
When you mentioned Hamilton, when you were hired in Hamilton, and then your role grew to include just about everything there, what did you maybe think you knew that turned out that you didn't, that you're able to apply into this job?
Well, it's a good question. I think, I have, you guys know me, there's some humility to me. I always feel like I don't really know. And I work that way. And going into the president role in junior hockey, I was working in the NHL with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Player development, it's natural for a player to be able to go and do that. And then when I decided to leave Toronto and come to Hamilton, and Michael said, you be the president of the team, and you run the hockey team, but you also run the business ops. I mean, it was all, speaking of drinking through a fire hose. That was my first experience post playing career, where it was coming hot and heavy. But you figure it out quickly, and you stick to your core principles on how you do things. So I learned a lot. It was an interesting time, guys, because I didn't know. It was a big decision to leave the NHL to go back to junior. I was on a decent path that way post-playing career and working with a great organization in Toronto. And it was the best thing that I could have done, because I've been able to build your own program. So I learned, I guess the question is, Ray, I learned a lot about every area of the organization.
You had a support role in Edmonton, Steve. So what are some of the takeaways? What did you learn in working closely with Kenny Holland and the group in Edmonton that maybe helped put you in a position where you feel real strong and comfortable about taking on the role in Ottawa?
Definitely feel more confident going into this role after my year in Edmonton. Working with Ken Holland was, you learn a lot about, just the way he deals on the day-to-day, his vision, his ability to execute on the greater picture as well. But he's just, as you know, he's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. He's an impressive gentleman, away from the rink. He's an astute hockey guy, obviously. And I think the one thing that I was really impressed by, because he's been at it for a long time, was how he's evolved as a manager. His ability to communicate and connect with the players was extraordinary. And so I learned a lot from Kenny. I think also just his ability to steady the ship. Inevitably there's going to be times through an NHL season where things aren't going well, and there's going to be pressure points. And it was really cool to see how he handled those situations.
So Steve, now that's a good jump point to you guys in Ottawa right now, is for really the first time in a long time, people are looking at this team and they can see that the road in front of it is really pretty terrific. If the blocks fall the way you hope they do. How do you keep the ship steady with Pierre Dorion, and now you got DJ Smith, and people are going to be talking about, if you get out 3-6-1 or something or other, that, do you need to make a change here? Do you need a new coach? How do you steady a ship through? It's 6.5, 7 months. It's not 6 games.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anything like that. I mean, again, just on the point that I touched on with Kenny, like when there's tough times, you kind of you stick with it and stick with your group, help them work through those times. I think that's that'll be part of my job, to be able to go through it. It's an exciting time in Ottawa. It is these young players, the way that they compete, the character, the closeness of the group, as I'm learning right now. It's a very exciting time. It's one thing to get a team to this level. We need to continue to work at it. There's still a lot of work to do for us to break through. But there's so many encouraging signs. We're excited to get started here. But as far as the ups and downs, I think I've built a lot of scar tissue over the years where you're able to, be able to be comfortable leading this group and making sure you're not making any rash or emotional decisions.
Well, does scar tissue start out when you find out you're playing right wing on the original Thrashers and you're a defenseman? I remember asking you, Stevie, I go, well, how much forward have you played? And you're like, well, really none. And, a little bit, you go, I hope you'll be able to tell, like, just when you're in St. Louis going back and forth in the bench.
Oh, Christ. I mean, it was, I guess, you know what, though, in all seriousness, though, my career, not the most talented player, Ray, that's enough said. You don't have to go any further than that. But you got to be able to adapt. And I think that's one thing post-playing career, just being able to adapt to certain situations. But, yeah, that time in my – I was doing anything like in the league. So coach is like, you're out of the lineup, you're in the lineup, you're on the bike, you're playing right wing. I was doing it. But yeah, there was times, especially with Mike Keenan in Vancouver, where I'm dressed as a forward and was an emotional guy, and so I remember one time in particular, Jyrki Lumme was a terrific player. Jyrki had a turnover, and I'm this pin in the middle of the bench, right? And Mike's losing it on Jyrki, and then he kicks me in the back, and he's yelling at Jyrki, he kicks me in the back and says, "Steve, go down there and show him how to play defense." So I had to stand up and kind of shuffle my way down. I'd get one shift on defense at about 15 seconds. He'd pull me off, and then he'd call me up on forward. I'd have to stand up, "Excuse me, boys," and try to the point. And I was a younger player at the time, and so much respect for the veterans on the team that I actually pulled Trevor Linden aside after the game. And I said, and he said, we get it. But no, it was
So, hey, let me ask you. I mean, we were on that first team in Atlanta where it's hard to win 14 games in an 82 game year, but we managed to do it. When you look back at the way you came through the early part of your career to become such a respected and leaned upon player in Edmonton, can you even believe those years in Atlanta? I mean, like you were the captain the second year. I was the captain the third year. I look at that, Steve, and I sometimes look at the team picture and I just laugh at, like, man, we tried so hard. We were just no good.
We had good guys, didn't we? Like, we would lay it on the line every night. But in all seriousness, Razor, like in my position now, and you go and you build a team in junior. Now you're in a situation where I'm in the role that I'm in. But didn't we learn more in those years? Like, we learned more from maybe how not to do things or how to do things, with that experience. So I thought that was, as trying as it was at times, I thought it was an incredibly valuable experience for my, for my playing career, but also in my role now.
I'm going to tell one quick story, Dregs.
Okay. Yeah.
So Stevie plays the first year. He's up front. He's on the blue line. We're going through players all over the place. Players are coming in. Players are going out. We don't even know who. Honestly, a lot of the players are. But they made a big deal about how we added skill in the second year, in the off season. So, but now Steve's our captain and he's on defense. And Steve, I don't know if you remember the first shift of the second year, because it encapsulates the Thrashers in like this: is our line's up front, Steve and Chris Tamer are on the blue line. And I win the draw, and it goes to Thames, and he goes to shoot it off the glass. on the far side. He shoots it into the crowd. This is the new skilled Thrashers. The face-off was 4 seconds. We were dying on the ice. And Tamer just kind of shrugged his shoulders and he went, sorry, boys.
I think he might have even been inside our blue line. It would have been a penalty in today's day.
It was so funny. We're like, oh, well, let's keep her moving. Anyway.
And it improved from there, I trust, or not really?
Well, yeah, because we won way more games the second year. More than 14.
All right, Steve, we'll let you go here momentarily, but a couple of things. We've learned and heard so much about Michael Andlauer, the ownership style that he's going to bring to the National Hockey League and the Ottawa Senators. You've had great success with Michael. We know this. What would be something we wouldn't know, or what might an Ottawa Senators fan expect from Michael Andlauer at this point, based on your experience with him?
Honestly, Dregs, I think what you see is what you get. He was his press conferences, media availabilities. He's speaking to everybody and you guys the same way that he speaks to us and our coaches. And he's got a great he's incredibly passionate. He's incredibly competitive. My relationship is strong with him, but there's a serious level of accountability. Like I think behind the scenes, I think what people will understand is I'm going to be held accountable, and he's a great guy to work with and for, but I got a lot of work to do, and there's expectations for sure. But I don't think there's anything, because of just the way you've seen him and heard from Michael. I don't think there's anything that you don't know about him.
Anything coming in the next few days on the Shane Pinto situation? I know every time I do Ottawa radio or radio in general, that's the name that people want to talk about. So you're working on it. I'm sure Pierre Dorian is working hard on it as well. But do you sense something might be close?
Well, and that's, I think, the one thing that we haven't talked about is Pierre's the general manager, and that hasn't changed for him. And he's on the day-to-day. And what I won't do is comment on some of the things that he's working on. I don't want to confuse the situation. It's better to come from one guy, and it's going to come from our general manager on that. No, I know that people are interested in it, obviously, but that's a question for Pierre.
Beautiful. All right, Steve. Well, we appreciate you taking the time. Whatever time you have left in Nova Scotia, enjoy it. It looks like it's been a pretty good trip for you guys.
It's been great. Yeah, we were at Fox Harbor yesterday.
Oh, wow. How'd that go? How'd you play?
Pretty good, Ray. Thanks for asking.
I know you do. Stevie's got a good game.
Does he?
No.
I honestly, here's the thing that I've just come to accept is I use rental clubs and they're regular flex. That's what I need now. I got to the age I can't swing it hard enough but I kept it straight. And
good for you.
We had some beautiful weather, but it was awesome. Like that's the environment that I think is, in particular for myself coming in at this time, to be able to be around the staff and the players and really get to know them. You guys know, like, it's one thing to be around the rink, but they're focused on getting ready for practice and doing their thing. But it was, I thought it was a really, really good couple of days for us.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking the time, Steve, and have a great and successful season with Ottawa.
I appreciate it. Great seeing you guys.
Congrats, Steve, and all the best, eh?
Thanks, Ray. Okay. Take care, guys.
Stevie Staios playing a beautiful golf course, Fox Harbor, with the fine people, the Ottawa Senators. Now, he didn't give us the score, but he indicated that he had a pretty good game. And you acknowledged, Ray, that Staios he's got game, right? He
was in the 70s for sure. He was in the 70s for sure. Wow. I did laugh when he said he used regular clubs. regular shaft.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, I'm at the range and our pro is there, and I'm getting a lesson. He's got the little TrackMan thing out there. It's really kind of fun, right? Makes you feel like you're actually half decent when you're not. Yeah. And I said, I'm not hitting it as far. I don't. And he goes, well, let's take a look, see what the numbers say. He goes, Oh, that's because your swing speed's down 4 miles an hour. I'm like, but I'm swinging as hard as I can. It's just the way it goes, man. Just the way it goes.
So good. But again, we're creatures of habit, but that's a perfect illustration of the game, the way Staios described. Like rental clubs, you and I have our clubs and, very particular about a putter, very particular about the driver and all of those things. But then, you go to a golf course, I don't feel like hauling my clubs across country or wherever, so I'm just going to rent and have a wonderful game. So maybe we have to take it a little bit less serious moving forward, Raymond.
I think that's I don't think anyone would think any different if you could lower your own expectation and just go play. You'd be way better. But we all think whatever. We think we're half decent at it. But Stevie's a competitive guy. Always had, he was a survivor. He talked a little bit about, and I just love the visual of him moving back and forth while Keenan's yelling at him, get up to the forwards, go back to the D, and he's got to walk past the guys. And like he was able to carve out a career that when he got to Edmonton, he was like a rock on that blue line.
Sure was.
And then he gets into the management in Hamilton with Michael Landlauer owning the team in Hamilton. And, so that relationship was built through the years Steve was there. And it wasn't just hockey. I remember him telling me one time, all of a sudden it was like, oh, I gotta look after the billets, like for the kids. Like it was every step, Dregs, of that organization that, fell onto his plate. And so this will be familiar but different in Ottawa. And they've hired a really, really capable and good person to be the president of their team.
Savvy interview too, right? Like I wasn't trying to trip him up. We got to ask the pertinent questions. And a Shane Pinto update needed to be asked. But how about it? Like he didn't even waver. It was just like, I'm just not going to answer that. I'm not going to comment on that because that's not my department. That's Pierre Dorian. And, but it was fantastic. It was perfect.
Yeah. You know what? And also I think for a market in Ottawa that is just so enthused and so excited. The reason I think that's really important is that, the new owner, that means change. And, it's part of Steve's job is, as he mentioned, that he saw with Ken Holland is to, in Edmonton, is to just kind of tamper the enthusiasm a little bit to just, this is my job. That's Pierre's job. That's DJ's job. And I think it's really important because it won't take long for, if things go a little bit sideways out of the gate for the waters to get choppy. And really there's no need for them to be, but the heightened expectation and the fact that Steve's there make things choppy by nature. But man, that's a good team. And I really think, I have a tough time. I was going to say, I really think they're about a playoff spot, but I really have a tough time deciding between them and Buffalo. I really do. And I'm looking forward to watching both of those teams because if they don't make it both this year, they're both making it next year. Like they are right there. Those are good teams.
All right, time for Ask Ray and Dregs Anything. You can send us your questions on Twitter and Instagram at Ray and Dregs or on the website, rayanddregs.com. We have time for a couple, maybe 3 questions. So how about a fun one from Ken Fitzgerald to get us going, Ray? Name a player that you were surprised at how skilled they were from both your playing days and maybe a player now that you're watching between the benches where you're like, ooh, I mean, you can see how skilled they are, but I didn't realize how fast or whatever it is. Is there 2 guys that come to mind, one that you played with and another one that, we watch as fans now?
Playing wise, this may sound a little goofy, but I'm going to say Pat Flatley. He was just a war horse on the boards. Like he was just like unbeatable. But he had, I'm going to put him and Kevin Dineen in the same box. because Kevin was a little bit similar, like just a ferocious competitor. And I wouldn't say they had silky smooth skill, but
skills
man,
nonetheless.
Yeah, but they would make a play and you'd go, oh, I didn't know that was there.
Wow.
Like I didn't know they could make that. And so they would never be considered skill players in the, in the big pot of NHL players. But and they had something that, you were like, oh, I just didn't know that. Another guy I would say, because he was busy running people over all the time, was John LeClair.
Right.
And John LeClair had really great hands. But that line, the only thing you noticed was they ran over top of you.
Yeah.
they steamrolled you. As for today, oh, God, those questions are hard. There's so many players that kind of jump out at you. Devon Taves is better than I thought he was.
Yeah.
When I first saw him, I'm like, oh my God, he is way better. I knew he was a good skater.
Sneaky good trade, right?
Oh, really? I think just a couple of draft picks.
Yeah.
And he would be a guy that
okay.
I would say jumps out for me.
See, I like that though, because that wouldn't be as obvious as, pick any high skilled player on every team in the league. And maybe it's pretty obvious that that's the player that you identify with, but
who's one player? Do you know who's one player? And he's one of the best players in the league, but I just didn't see him being as dominant a player as he is, and that's Braden Point. I think
especially when healthy, right?
Oh, he is an amazing player.
Yeah.
I just didn't see it.
No.
You know who told me about him was we were doing the World Junior team, Al Murray, who was Tampa's head scout for years and years. He said this kid he's going to be the best player on this team, Canada team. And he was as it went through the tournament, and then third round pick, and they hit gold there.
Yeah. All right. We have a Red Wings fan checking into Ray and Dregs on Ask Ray and Dregs Anything. Dylan Reagan. Do you guys feel that Steve Yzerman did enough this offseason? And he lifts the players that were brought in, DeBrincat, of course, Petrie, Compher, Costin, Sprong, Fisher, Gostisbehere. And did Yzerman do enough to make the jump to the playoffs after an 8-year absence?
I have them third behind Buffalo and Ottawa. As I just said, I don't know if it's Ottawa, Buffalo, or Buffalo, Ottawa, but I have Detroit third in that grouping of teams that are coming up the chain. I do now. When you say did he do enough? I mean, you just listed 8 players.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's a lot. The biggest thing I think I look at in Detroit's roster is there is no true number one center.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Dylan Larkin, if you were to really peg him,
two. Yeah.
I think that would be his ace's place. So I wonder if that's something that you just, where are you going to find a number one center? They're not floating around.
No.
And so I wonder about that. And I wonder if they're, if their D is quick enough. Some of their D are bigger and a little heavier footed.
Yeah.
And, and I wonder if they're able to play around that too.
Excellent.
So I guess I don't really have an answer. I will say I think he did enough.
Mm-hmm.
Is it enough? I don't know. We got 82 games to find out.
They're better, but is it enough? You're right.
Right.
We don't know
that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Dylan. We'll check back and ask Ray and Dregs anything on Friday and perhaps take another couple, 3, 4 more. See how it goes. What's the rest of the week look like for you?
Well, Dregs, it's 6:49 a.m. in Vancouver.
Yeah. You and Zuby had to get up early this morning.
Oh, boy. That was
early.
That was a curse the alarm day. Get the kids off to school, do a little reading. Baseball playoff time, so I'll be watching some of that when I'm riding the bike today.
Yeah.
But it's honestly, even though the season hasn't started, it feels like it started now. I'm sure for you, you've been on the air. I haven't been on the air yet, but it's prep time and getting ready for next Tuesday, which is my first game, the first game of the first day of the season. So we have a triple header on ESPN, and it starts in Tampa, and then I'm in Pittsburgh for Bedard's first game, and then they go, our third game's out in Vegas with the banner raising. So
nice.
It'll hit fast on Tuesday, that's for sure. So this week's work.
I think we both played probably our last rounds of golf.
You know what,
Feels
Dregs?
that way. No?
I'm not gonna lie. I said it was my last round. I played really good, so I'm gonna play Friday again.
Oh, good for you.
I'm gonna drop Riley off at school. I think I'm gonna be able to stop the car to push him out because I got a tight turnaround to the tee time, and then pick him up on the way home. So Friday will be the end of it for me.
Well, so what an experience I had this week, Monday. Wooden Sticks in Uxbridge, Ontario, as I think a dozen replica holes, right? Amen Corner, you name it. Just a beautiful facility. Somehow, some way, we'll have to get you out there at some point. But my buddy Bob Doyle's 60th birthday, so a group of us went and played golf on Monday, stayed overnight, played poker. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the end of the year where my give up beep meter just doesn't register. But I always play my best golf at the end of the year because I just don't, the expectation isn't there. So how about this? So the island hole, where is that? TPC?
TPC number 17. Do you know anybody that's birdied that hole?
Yeah.
It's 17.
Yeah.
It's number 17.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was me. Yeah.
That was
9 iron. That was 9 iron. Do you have time? I'll tell you about it. Go ahead.
Well, I birdied it as well, 17. It's the replica hole at Wooden Sticks. Did
anyone hit it in the water?
Yes, everybody else.
It's kind of funny when they do.
Guy didn't,
It's kind of funny when they do.
It's hilarious.
I don't know why it's funny, but it really is.
Yeah, but I and I'm not bragging. It's just fact. I almost jarred it. Like my ball mark was like 2 inches from the hole. So I had a tap in birdie, which was nice.
Nice.
And then followed it up with a sweet drive on 18, little punch, 60 degree to 8 feet, birdie finish.
Oh, and those are your last 2 holes of the year?
Yeah.
Oh,
the only thing
what that is? You're sucked back in for next year. You can't wait to start.
We'll see. I might try and squeeze one more out as well. All right, buddy. Thanks for getting up early, and we'll check back again on Friday.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for Steve Staios for joining us, and we'll talk to you again on Friday.
Thank you to our sponsors who continue to support Ray and Dregs and make the podcast possible. Our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, and Tim Hortons. As always, thanks to you for listening, rating, sharing the podcast, and for following us on our Ray and Dregs YouTube channel. Till next time, episode 4. Stay safe, everybody.